Abshen Bokokwane. Greetings from Musoni. Mtukulu Wabangoni Nibandao. Welcome to AI, Ancestral Intelligence with Musoni. And today's topic of discussion is the invention of the Khoisan race. People living in South Africa today are very aware of a propaganda that states that Bantu people, I put it in inverted commas, are not indigenous to South Africa. We supposedly invaded the Khoisan people. So what we're going to discuss here is that there is no such thing as a Khoisan people. We'll start with a paper that deals with the background of how this illegitimate term or race was invented and created. Our analysis will be based on this paper right here, Inventing Races, Robert Broom's research on the Khoisan. And bottom right, that is the picture of Robert Broom. In the first page, I've underlined the section that we're going to read. In his later works, Broom divided the Khoisan into three races: Bushmen, Hottentot, and Korana. When at the end of his career, he was asked about the Korana, whose status as a distinctive taxon was questioned by many. He replied, "I invented the Korana." In my most recent video on my YouTube channel, titled "The Founders of Ancient Egypt Were Black Anthropological Evidence," I address the issue of race and explaining, because a lot of people would say race is not scientific, it's more of a social construct, but nobody has actually explained that. So in this video, I break down why it does not fit into a scientific analysis. And in this analysis, we also see more evidence that even within the term, the race Khoisan, the analysis or the method called typology, racial typology, which they use to classify a person under a specific race based on the cranial measurements and whatnot. The same flawed methodology also shows that the people who have been grouped as the Khoisan race, those different groups, using that methodology, it shows that they belong to different races. Let's read. Apart from denying the existence of a Strandloper race, Broom's paper 1923a contained other novel interpretations. Among the San, he found that the skulls emanating from the south of the Orange River, the Cape Bushmen, differed from the ones more in the north, the Bushmen of the Kalahari and the Southwest Africa, now Namibia. He believed that this dissimilarity was due to substantial admixture of the San and the Khoi in the north. And in another method using the exact same approach, Piper's research on the blood groups of the Khoisan suggested that there was a great difference between the Khoi and the San, especially in the B type, which was almost absent among the latter and quite common in the former population. From these data, and bearing in mind the distribution of blood types in other populations from the region, Piper concluded that the San and the Khoi were not of the same origin. Broom, 1941-246, noted that the Hottentots, on whom Piper conducted his research, were probably mainly Korana, Piper's 1935 results therefore appeared to corroborate Broom's view of the Korana as a separate race. So we can see that using this flawed methodologies, different methodologies for that matter, but they all using the same approach of a preconceived idea of what a true Negro is supposed to look like, or the type of results the measurements are supposed to give. Show it just continually divides and divides and divides, because essentially using the same methods that created the Khoisan race, when you apply those methods within the Khoisan race, it shows that the Khoisan people are not of the same race. Now, here's another part of the article that I found completely very interesting. It says, taking some anatomical and linguistic similarities as a starting point, he further conjectured that the San might be the degenerate descendants of the Mongoloid race. Yeah, so this is from the 1900s. They used to call people degenerates. Yeah, so of the Mongoloid race, which is your Asiatic, while the Khoi who migrated to the region later. So you can see the San are supposed to have come from Asia. And the Khoi who migrated to the region later might have been the less degenerate offspring of the race which built the pyramids. So they did their analysis, and the conclusion they came to is that the Khoi and the San are not indigenous in Southern Africa, which is very interesting, because the view that is held by Eurocentrics today, that the Khoisan are a people who are indigenous, that we have invaded the Bantu people, that view comes from that old and unscientific approach. And from that same unscientific approach, they came up with theories such as, the theory that we invaded the Khoisan, they are indigenous to Southern Africa. But here we can see that the same school of thought says they do not originate from Southern Africa. They migrated from the south, and they are degenerate, which means they're actually inferior to their ancestors. They instead of it's like a backward evolution type of setup. That is the same unscientific school of thought that produced the Bantu migration. As you can see on the map, the Bantu migration hypothesis that suggests that all the Bantu people came from West Africa and were spread towards Central Africa, to the east, and then to the south, and then those of us who traveled or migrated south invaded the Khoisan people. So we can see how ridiculous these theories are, because the same school of thought tends to produce contradictory hypotheses within itself. The same way the methodology and approach that produced the Khoisan race out of the black race is the same methodology that produced, if you apply it within the Khoisan race, you find that the Khoisan people are not of the same race, they are of different races. It says here again affirmed that within the Khoi, Laura, which is the Korana, can be distinguished on morphological grounds. They differ from the rest of the Khoi in being of a darker complexion, in having broader noses, and frequently in having well-developed brow ridges. That is a Broom. So we can see that this approach is problematic in every way possible. Dobbs-Hansky explains the problem even better. In his 1962 observation, he observed, obviously under the system, every anthropologist can manufacture racial types to suit his taste. It would appear that this is exactly what happened in South African anthropology during the first half of the 20th century. It resulted in a large variety of differing opinions on the classification and origins of local populations, which produced considerable confusion amongst experts. Why are experts confused? It was impossible to resolve the confusion while still operating within the typological framework for which at that time there were no alternatives. Broom's work seems to be one of the prime examples of racial typology. The other important theoretical supposition that played a significant role in the formation of Broom's racial classification of the Khoisan were the ideas of racial succession, migration, and extinction. These ideas dominated discourse in several social and natural sciences of the early 20th century and were congruent with the imperialistic attitudes of that time. So you can see from this analysis that a majority of people that still subscribe to this Khoisan and Bantu migration, which has no basis in any scientific findings. And so at the end of the article, a solution is given. It says instead of using races based on arbitrary chosen types, the new research concentrated on breeding populations which proved to be more sensible and useful units in the study of human variation within the population framework. Hall and Morris, 1983, Morris, 1992. Much larger samples were studied using newly developed techniques, such as the multivariate analysis. This is the same analysis that I used to show how the pre-dynastic ancient Egyptians of the Badari and Nakada cluster with tropical Africans who are today labeled by Eurocentrics as sub-Saharan. It was demonstrated that what were previously presumed to be distinct races were in fact populations that were biologically indistinguishable from one another. To give another example of the same type of approach is when it comes to the study of African cultures. On the one extreme, we have people that say Africa is not a village and it's not a monolith and we are all completely different, whereas the other one says that the opposite extreme states that Africans are of one culture and are the same. It all depends on what methods you use to come up with your conclusion. So one person can actually look at how different the customs are applied, which is a very problematic methodology. You can look at, for example, how circumcision rituals are applied very differently and conclude that these people are very different. Whereas the most accurate method is to deal with affinity. It is to study all human cultures and putting them together to see which ones are more related to each other in terms of affinity, because there is no such thing as an identical practice even amongst Zulu people, for example. From one family clan to another, you will have the same practice being applied differently. Of course, this racial typology also becomes a problem if even amongst the race of people they call Bantu. And in another article, it states here that now the peoples known to have come in contact with the Bantus, these characters could not have been transmitted by the Bushman Hottentot group nor by the dwarf races of Central Africa. The Northern Europeans visited the district too late to account for them in the series of skulls, most of which are those of Zulu warriors killed in the early decades of the present century, so that it is tempting hypothesis to suppose that these characters are due to Arabic influences, especially as several observers have noted Semitic traits in the AmaZulu. So in their study, they found that AmaZulu have Semitic traits, Asiatic traits, and they're looking for their origins in the Asiatic people, which is ridiculous because we are the original people. So if anybody would have originated these traits as us, how can the parent have inherited them from the child? And the writer of the article even says one difficulty to explain this hypothesis that AmaZulu inherited the traits from the Arabs is why the brachycephalic element should be more dominant among the Zulu than among the K or Mozambique tribes, who have been equally, if not in some cases more, exposed to foreign intermixture. And another is that of Hypsis tenobrachycephalic type, which only one out of the several found among the Semitic races. Excuse my pronunciation of these Greek words. Now, in this article, we get to look at an example of a more objective way of doing an analysis anthropologically. It's titled Negro Crania from the Taita Hills. And this is the map, the interrelationships of African, Negro, and allied races. And basically, these are all African people. And the analysis of the map that I showed, it states, considering only the reduced coefficients less than 10, division can be made into three groups. So those African people that you saw on that map, first group A is the Congo, Cameroons, Gabon, Negroes from Egypt, Gala, and Somali. The first three of these are from West Africa. Note that, which is generally supposed to be the home of the true Negro. The Egyptian series probably came from the Sudan. Again, Eurocentric anthropologists trying to fit everything into their worldview and misconceptions. If there are black people in Egypt, just like I showed with the previous video that I mentioned earlier on, that Alejandro, the archaeologist, when the anthropologist told him that 8th dynasty official from ancient Kemet, Mr. Shemai, was black, the conclusion was he came from Sudan. And the Gala and Somali are usually thought to be essentially Hermetic in physical type, and the first three and possibly the fourth represent Bantu-speaking peoples, but the Gala and Somali speak an Hermetic language. But hey, they all cluster together. And then the B group is the K word. These are old articles, so they've been using these delinquent words. The K and the Angoni clustered together. The physical similarities of these two southern Bantu-speaking peoples is not surprising, so they're not surprised that these clustered together. And the third group, which is group C, is Tanganyika, Taita, which are in East Africa, and the Hottentots. So now the so-called Hottentots, these are the Khoi people, the Khwe, of Southern Africa. And they cluster together with people from Tanganyika and Taita there in Tanzania and Kenya. The close resemblance between the groups from Tanganyika territory and Kenya colony is to be expected. Yes, so they're not surprised about the two clustering together from cultural evidence and from their geographical position. So they also have this misconception that geographical position is supposed to give you affinity automatically. But it is surprising to find that they are linked up with the non-baNTU Hottentots, and that the last bear their closest resemblance to the Taita, who are geographically further removed from them than other peoples of Tanganyika territory. So this is what happens when you actually apply scientific methods. You get to have accuracy, which will often clash with your preconceived ideas, which are products of social and political constructs. Because clearly here we can see that the Khoi people, they cluster with baNTU people. So the Khoi people are baNTU. That is based on a scientific method of affinity. And I'm not just going to rely on the one analysis. I'm going to present more. And there's obviously more than what I'm going to present. And in this article by Dr. Keita, who I cited in the previous video that I made reference to in the beginning of this video, early Nile Valley farmers from El Badari, Aboriginals, or European Negro Nostratic immigrants. Craniometric affinities considered from other data. So when we look at affinity, again, a more objective method in anthropology, from this article that I've just cited, this is basically from that article. We can see that the people who have been labeled as a different race from the baNTU and are called Khoisan, we can see here Bushmen, they cluster together with the Badarian. The Badarian are the pre-dynastic of ancient Kemet. And the Badari pre-dynastic ancient Kemet also cluster with the Taita of people of Kenya, as we have seen in the previous video, and also in this article that I've cited with the three groups A, B, and C, where they are shocked that the people of Tanganyika and Taita cluster with the so-called Hottentot. So different sources, three different articles, we've demonstrated that the so-called Khoi people actually cluster with other tropical Africans. And even when you use the 11 and 15 variables, the different methods of determining affinity, it continues to show that the Badarian cluster with the Bushmen, so-called Bushmen, and so we can see the continuity of the objective evidence. Greetings from Musoni once again. I am not standing alone today. I've got my friend here with me, Rayneth. Hi Rayneth, say hi to the people.
Hi. Today get Renetim and I today get case in Lisa Khwe Khoisan. Namibia case in Ham Khobati want to get current Harisa. Namibia what Khoisan.
Wow. By the way, that language is called Damara.
Yeah.
Is it Damara Nama or just Damara?
It's Damara.
Oh, Damara. This is Damara. So there's Damara Nama as well. Okay, this is Damara. She just said her name is Rayneth, and she is Khoi, very proud to be Khoi. And yeah, and what else did I understand? You said
I think that's all
everybody should come to Namibia. It's a beautiful place. You're most welcome. All right. Wow, wait. I thought Khoi people were not black. So how come?
How are we not black? We are black. Am I not black?
Oh.
I am black.
Oh, and you are Khoi. Okay,
Yes,
interesting.
You're very proud one.
I've learned something today. You know, where I come from, they say Khoi people are not black. And we invaded the land of the Khoi. But we look the same.
I am black.
All right.
Black African woman.
Peace. Till the next episode.
Sharp.
Away.
That was me in Namibia, and with me it was my friend Rayneth. She's from the Damara Nation, which is one of the Khoisan groups. And I just basically had fun shooting the video just to dispel this entire myth that black people invaded the Khoi and whatnot. But we are actually the same people. So the next time a person shows you this ridiculous map or makes reference to the delinquent Bantu migration hypothesis, refer them to this video. When they come out and claim that the Khoi people or the Khwe people are not Bantu, come out and show them this video. And once again, also, the even on a linguistic point of view, the idea that there is a Khoisan family of languages which is outside of the Bantu languages is this, it falls in the same basket as the Bantu migration hypothesis. None of them have been proven scientifically or using scientific methods. All of this, that even people today are still following these old unscientific and biased Eurocentric ideas, actually thinking they're real, but they're not. In another study that I looked at, the Amampondo, and so basically when they were comparing Southern African Bantus, Amampondo, AmaXhosa have more affinity with the so-called Bushmen or Khoisan, and the idea was they have closer affinity to them because of intermarriage. So there's this whole idea of people look like this because they're hybrids or because they intermarried. There is no such evidence. These are all wild speculations, just like the Bantu migration, just like the Khoisan race. So in conclusion, the Khoi people, the Khwe people, the Xam people, the Khung, all these people that have been classified as Khoisan are all Bantu people. And no one can state that they're linguistically they fall outside of the Bantu family of languages until they've proven it. It has not been proven, but anthropologically we have proven that they have affinity with the so-called Bantu people. We are Abantu. So thank you for watching. Like the video, share the video. If you have not subscribed to the channel, press that subscriber button and that notification for more videos and more ancestral intelligence with Misoni. Peace and African power. And so I will end this video by adding a short video of the Hadza people of East Africa. They are hunter-gatherers, and they also speak with a lot of clicks, just like the Khwe people. So it shows that African people are indeed related. And these divisions that they've put across the continent are legitimate, just as illegitimate as the borders that they've put to separate the Maasai in Kenya and the Maasai in Tanzania, to separate the Basotho in South Africa and the Basotho in Lesotho, and so on throughout the whole continent. Wherever you find a border, you find a family or a clan that has been separated. The clan always falling into two groups, just like the Herero of Namibia and the Herero of Botswana.
Oh.